The example we have here from Bach is a nice way to get into analyzing chords in actual music. So other than the kind of abstracted chords we just write on staff paper, here we have a great way to kind of ease our way into like I said, chordal analysis in like actual repertoire. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go through the first four bars of this Bach prelude in C major and see if you can label the chords. Go ahead and use the process whereby we'll name the root of the chord, we'll use the quality of the chord, and we can talk about the inversion. Um, you could also certainly do Roman numeral analysis as well, right? But at least for the time being, I think doing the root quality and inversion will give you a good sense of how this works. One of the reasons this is a nice starting point is because even though there's a lot of ink within these first four bars, the harmonic language itself is actually fairly tame. In fact, if you look at each chord, you'll notice that the arpeggiation really just covers one harmony per bar. So in the entire bar, there's really only one chord, and you can figure out what that chord, or in this case, our arpeggiated chord, is by using a process not at all dissimilar to what we talked about when we were looking, when we were learning how to find the roots, the qualities, and the intervals. And then also kind of figuring out the figured bass and those things as well. So what I can do is I can basically take an inventory of all the notes that are represented in each particular bar, arrange them in such a way to where I can locate the root and then figure out which of those chordal members is at the bottom of the stack or at the bottom of the harmony, and then that'll help me figure out the quality and the inversion. Okay, so I'd like you to take a stab at doing this in measures 1 through 4. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you work I've already done later on in the piece, starting at measure 12 on the second page. By the way, this presentation of the piece is right out of your Burkhart. Starts on page 109. So I'll show you what I've done on the next page of this for 4 bars starting at measure 12. So what I've done in measure 12 is I've done exactly what I'm suggesting that you do, is I took an inventory of all the pitches represented in this bar, and I wrote that inventory over here. Okay, so I see that I have a G, I have a B flat, I have an E, I have a C sharp. You see I put parentheses around this G because it's already accounted for down here, and so I was just telling myself I didn't need to worry about listing that another time. So I took inventory of the pitches here, and then just so I could see them visually, I splattered them onto just a single staff here. Right, I first did it in the way in which it's presented, which is to say the G is at the bottom of the stack, and then I represented all the other notes as well. And then I used my trick for finding the root, and I determined that C sharp was the root of the chord because that's the arrangement that gave me these stacked in thirds. Okay, and so then I just did that analysis, and I realized that we had a C sharp fully diminished seventh chord, which I represented here, but you see the 4-3 because I recognized that the fifth of the chord was the lowest sounding note in this whole group here. Okay, so that's how I determined that was a C sharp fully diminished 4-3 chord. And then coming over to measure 13, I took a similar approach, but you'll notice I did it a little bit differently here. Again, I took inventory, right? All I really did is I just looked from the bottom of the stack, and I wrote the F here. I looked the next thing up was an A, and I wrote that here. The next thing up was a D, right? And then these other two notes here are just repetitions of pitches I already had. So I have the pitches I have to work with are F, A, and D. So I represented them on the staff as presented with F on the bottom, and then I reorganized them into root position so I could determine that the D was the root of the chord. So it's a D chord, D, F, A, forms a D minor triad, and then because it's inverted, I look to see which of those notes is in the bottom, and in fact it's a chordal third, so it's in the sixth position. So that's how I determine that. And then coming next door to measure 14, similar process, but I've represented it a little bit differently. I purposely did it just a little bit differently in these bars because, your approach or your method of making sense of this might differ just a bit in terms of how you write it down. So here, what I did is I circled the notes as I found them, and then I said, okay, I've got an F, right? And then I just kind of wrote them horizontally. So here I have an A flat, okay? And you can see that that's what I used to find the D and the B as well. Okay, I drew parentheses around the notes that were repetitions. For example, the F here. Okay, And then I drew them in as presented with F on the bottom. I found just another space on the staff where I could fit in some more scribbles, and that's how I got here to write them, to write these pitches in a root position order, and that's how I identified B as the root of the chord. Okay, so by the time I was all was said and done, I realized that I had a B fully diminished seventh chord with the fifth on the bottom. Okay, and that was that one. And then I did a similar process here. Now here's in this one, what I did was a little bit differently because once I took inventory of the note, then I went ahead and crossed that out to tell myself that, yep, I accounted for the E, so I don't have to worry myself about that part of the ink. I accounted for the G, so I crossed that out, right? And then I accounted for the C, so I crossed that out. Just making sure I've done a complete inventory here, and then everything else is a repetition of pitches I've already been given, okay? So then I write them with the same chordal member or the same pitch on the bottom. Then I reorganize to make sure I understand the root. The root is C, and then I identify the third as being in the bass. And so it's a C major triad in first inversion. Okay, so that's what I did in these 4 bars. I invite you to do the same thing in the opening 4 bars.